Good Monday morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you had a wonderful weekend and some good Christmas programs. Brandon, because you're a singer, do you sing in your ward crop?
Oh, gosh. No, not this time. I went and sat in the pews like an idiot.
Yeah, I'm big on hiding my light under a bushel as well.
Hey, thanks a lot. Yeah.
But no, it's Christmas this week and magical things are happening across the board. And one of our headlines that we're going to be covering is a Christmas miracle has happened across the Wasatch Front, and an olive branch has been extended to an anti-Mormon, and it's looking like it was accepted. Very cool stuff. And in our featured story, the reaction from the Australian government to the tragic Bondi Beach massacre that happened last week is less than ideal in my eyes, and we'll talk about that. And the last thing we'll be talking about is we need to stop acting like personal revelation needs to be broadcast and mandated to the masses. At least I think so, and we'll talk about what I mean there. But all this and more, welcome. My name is Jackson William Paul, and this is Latter Daily Saints.
What power shall stay the heavens from pouring down knowledge from heaven upon the heads of the latter-day saints?
Brandon, is it okay if I ruin something for you real quick, and also probably for our viewers as well?
You know, you ruin so many things for me every day. I accept it at this point.
Well, one more thing to add to that list, Brandon. Is there something you notice about this nativity that was kindly given to us? I think you already know.
Yeah, I know. I already know, but you say it.
Guys, here am I thinking that this is just a wonderful little nativity, you know? Some fan, it's fan mail, that sent us a 3D printed nativity.
The fan.
And then the first day that we have it on the desk, our very own D. John Butler, David John Butler, comes in and he's like, why are two dinosaur heads creeping out to eat this baby right here? And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, this looks like a T-Rex head, and then this looks like a Stegosaurus head. And I'm like, now this is ruined for me.
This is why we lock Dave out of the studio
Exactly.
on a normal basis.
Anyways, kind of funny. But, Brando, the Christmas season is upon us, and some miracles are happening across the Wasatch Front, okay? If any of you had the pleasure of seeing Jacob Hansen when he came into town last week because he had a debate with a Catholic, that's, I think, coming out later today about the apostasy. But then he throws this out on Twitter, and I'm like, what? He went and got dinner with our man, John Dehlin. And if you just want to zoom in, I'm going to read this for the people here. He says, so I was sitting in the Joseph Smith Memorial Building at Temple Square listening to the beautiful Christmas music, and I remembered the story of the Germans and the British laying down their weapons on Christmas Day. If any of you know that story, it's pretty wild. Also super psychologically messed up, everyone involved, but that's a story for a different day. It says, I had a couple of hours to kill, so I decided to reach out to John Dehlin and asked if I could take him to dinner. This time he accepted. Peacemaking does not require we compromise our values. It does not require we allow others to abuse us, but we should remember, especially at Christmas time, that while we are to never compromise our convictions, one of those convictions is to still love those with whom we totally disagree. Merry Christmas, everyone. Then scroll down to their happy faces.
Aww.
So, yeah, if any of you have been following either John Dehlin or Jacob Hansen for the last probably 5 years, you know that they are not the closest of friends at all. And for a while, John had Jacob blocked for a long time, and there's been some videos made on both sides talking about one another. And this reoccurring theme that bugs the beans out of me is this talking about people instead of to people. And that's kind of what happened for a while between them. And over the last little bit since the Michigan shooting, I know that they've been dialoguing back and forth. And you guys probably saw that Greg Mattson went on Mormon Stories and the episode went a little bit differently than the one that we did with John and the aftermath too. But it just seems as though I think this is a step in the right direction. What do you think, Brando?
I 100% agree. When I initially saw the picture, I felt just like surprised, and then I kind of felt this little warm jelly inside when I was looking at it. And to me, you know, I might ruffle some feathers by saying this. I don't think John Dehlin is the enemy. I don't think these ex-Mormons are the enemy. I think that their ideas, a lot of their ideas are the enemy. And I think there is some, I know we've talked about how John Dehlin has been deceptive in his marketing of his channel towards members of the church, and I still stand by that. That being said, I think there might still be some genuineness to his desire to, help people and he goes about it in some of the wrong ways. But I think it's just, it's cool to see someone them both laying down their weapons and peacemaking a little bit. Just makes me feel good.
Yeah.
I don't know.
John DeLynch's heart grew 3 sizes that day. Just kidding. John, we love you. Please unblock me on Instagram. Please. Anyways, wonderful things. Christmas miracles happening across the board. Now, moving on to our featured story. As we covered in last week's episode about the awful tragedy that happened in Australia at Bondi Beach, it's been less than encouraging to see the reaction of the government leaders over in Australia. And you'll probably disagree. I mean, there'll be a good handful of people that disagree with me in the comments, but I invite your views to be shared because I'm very passionate about what we're about to talk about. So if any of you didn't see last week's episode or have been living under a literal rock, then last week there was an awful massacre. About 15 people passed away and were killed by some Islamic extremists. It was a father and son that went and opened fired on Hanukkah celebrators on the beach. And this has been the reaction of the Prime Minister. So let's play this video. It's about 2 minutes long, and then we'll talk about this.
Today, I'm also announcing that the government will establish a national gun buyback scheme to purchase surplus, newly banned and illegal firearms, the largest buyback since the Howard government initiated one in 1996. Australia's gun laws were last substantially reformed in the wake of the Port Arthur tragedy. The terrible events at Bondi show we need to get more guns off our streets. We know that one of these terrorists held a firearm licence and had 6 guns, in spite of living in the middle of Sydney suburbs there at Bonnyrigg. There's no reason why someone in that situation needed that many guns. There are now more than 4 million firearms in Australia, more than at the time of the Port Arthur massacre, nearly 30 years ago. The government will introduce legislation to support the funding of this buyback scheme and meet the costs on a 50-50 basis with states and territories. We expect hundreds of thousands of firearms will be collected and destroyed through this scheme. Consistent with the approach that was taken in 1996, the government is proposing that states and territories will be responsible for the collection, processing and payment to individuals for surrendered firearms. The Australian Federal Police will then be responsible for the destruction of these firearms. Australians are rightly proud of our gun laws, and until 5 years ago, Australians were rightly proud that there had not been a repeat of Port Arthur. They were rightly proud we're not home to the constant carnage we see in some countries. But there have been, of course, incidents in both Queensland and Victoria that have seen so-called sovereign citizens murder police officers. We will introduce this national buyback scheme to get guns off our streets and to help to assist to make all Australians safe.
Okay. So I have a lot of thoughts about this, and I'll try to be succinct in expressing those thoughts. So just off of, let's go with the logic of give them the benefit of the doubt, okay? They have this awful shooting that happens, and they don't want more of these incidents to occur, right, Brandon? That's a
fair
righteous
conclusion.
desire right there. Now, let's think about the equation being put forth here, right? People that commit these awful crimes and mass shootings, like, is it against the law to kill people in Australia?
Yeah,
Yeah, it is.
of course.
Yeah. And so these people that commit these atrocities, they don't care about the law. That's not something they have an interest in following. They don't care about the law. And so at this point where we're at, okay, he said there's an estimated 4 million guns in Australia. And they're going to institute a buyback program where civilians are going to take their guns, go and hand them over to the government, and receive payment for them.
And they have to hand them over.
Exactly.
No matter what. They'll get a payout for it, but they have to hand them over.
So these people that are of the nature of wanting to kill other citizens, they already don't care about the law. And you think that they're willingly going to be like, you got me. I guess now I'm not going to do this. Here you go. These criminals are going to go hand their guns over willingly. I don't think that that's going to occur. And then you have all of these law-abiding citizens that want to follow the law, that don't want to go to jail, that don't have a desire to commit these atrocities. They're going to go hand over their guns and be disarmed. And so then you have this criminal class that they already don't care about the law. They're already breaking dozens and dozens of laws when they go and take these firearms and they go and kill people. Like, people that want to do these sick and twisted things, they're going to find a way regardless, and they're already breaking the law. What you're doing is you're disarming the civilian populace that they now don't have a way to defend themselves. You know what I'm saying? And I've had, a few years ago, we had in Salt Lake City, I don't know if you remember this, but they did a gun buyback program in downtown Salt Lake City.
No, I don't remember that.
Yeah. And it was hilarious, the reaction, because a bunch of people just like 3D printed some janky guns and went to go turn it in to like get money back for it. And we went down there and we met with some of the guys. I asked them, I'm like, because they had been there all day, I was like, what kind of people have been turning in their guns and stuff? And he's like, just old white people. Just old white people. And I'm like, that is so funny. And so here's the thing. I've heard people present this solution for some of the atrocities happening in the United States of America, and it just is so illogical. Because let's say in the United States of America, to stop these awful mass shootings from happening, they do a mandatory gun buyback. All of the law-abiding citizens that don't have a disposition to do these awful crimes are going to go give their guns back. You're going to disarm the civilian populace, and then all the criminals that already don't care about breaking the law are going to continue to have their guns and just have an easier time committing these atrocities because we don't have a way to defend ourselves. Help me understand, Brando, if you see some logic flaws in that equation that I just put forth.
I mean, this topic has been dissected for decades, and especially in recent years, given the uptick in mass shootings, I see that logic. I want to say that I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but that logic makes a ton of sense to me, and I think that's logic that has been put forth and by people who are anti-buyback programs and things like that, and that's because it makes sense. The criminals can still obtain guns via the black market or whatever, and then we're left as sitting ducks. To me, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights were inspired by God, and one of the amendments there is that we have the right to bear arms.
Yep.
And if with that logic, if God is saying this is one of our rights, then that's what I fall back on as my argument for why programs like this don't work. But we need to try and convince people who live in a secular society why it doesn't work either. And that logic that you just put forth is so simple to me.
Yeah, so if you disagree with that in the comments, please let me know why that is illogical there. And here's the thing, I'm not totally against making the process to get registered firearms, a bit more arduous to make sure that blatant criminals aren't easily purchasing weapons.
I don't think any sensible person is against that at all.
Exactly. And a lot of times those efforts are masked to make it hard for law-abiding citizens to get guns as well, and I'm not in favor of that as well. But I just see this as not really solving the issue here. If you've seen the influx of, mass immigration from Islamic extremists into Australia, has been massive over the recent years. And there's a lot of different factors that go into what happened at Bondi Beach. But I don't think disarming the civilian populace from being able to defend themselves is the answer in the slightest. And that reminds me of a frustrating conversation I had with another member of the church recently after the Michigan shooting. We're kind of talking about all that tragedy, and he asked me, he's like, do you carry a gun? Do you conceal carry? I'm like, maybe. Why? And he's like, well, I just have been doing a lot of thinking and praying about it, if I should conceal carry a gun. And I was just reminded of the anti-Nephi Lehis that laid down their weapons of war and buried them. And then when the Lamanites came up against them, they just willingly let them kill them. And I think that that's kind of the attitude that we need to have as members of the church.
Wow.
Okay. And I was greatly disturbed by this. Okay. And I'll tell you why. And I'm hoping some of you disagree with me and we can have a good conversation in the comments. Okay. Let's actually just turn there. Let's open up scripture notes there, Brandon, and go to Alma chapter 56. Okay. We're going to start in verse 5, and this is Helaman writing an epistle to Moroni. And in this epistle, he says in verse 5, he says, "Therefore it sufficeth me to tell you that 2,000 of these young men hath taken their weapons of war, and would that I should be their leader. And we have come forth to defend our country. And now ye also know concerning the covenant which their fathers made, that they would not take up their weapons of war against their brethren to shed blood. But in the 26th year, when they saw our afflictions and our tribulations for them, they were about to break the covenant which they had made and take up their weapons of war in our defense. But I would not suffer them that they should break this covenant which they had made, supposing that God would strengthen us insomuch that we should not suffer more because of the fulfilling the oath which they had taken. But behold, here is one thing in which we may have great joy. For behold, in the 26th year, I, Helaman, did march at the head of these 2,000 young men to the city of Judea to assist Antipas, whom ye had appointed a leader over the people of that part of the land." Okay, so what's going on here? We have the fathers, the parents of these 2,000 stripling warriors. They made a covenant with God that they would bury their weapons of war and they would no longer stain their swords with the blood of their brethren, because it was something that they were doing unrighteously, essentially. It was something that was preventing them to have a closer proximity with God. And so they made that covenant. And what happened was the Lamanites, they didn't stop killing the Nephites. They didn't stop going up against war. And it says that they got to a point where they almost decided to break their covenant, pick up their arms against their brethren again. But Helaman decided that no, they should keep their covenant. But then their sons, this 2,000 stripling warriors, they decided to pick up their swords and defend the people. Okay, so we already see in that story alone that that was a covenant that they needed to make with their God. It wasn't a blanket thing for the entire people. Okay, and it's really frustrating. I've seen this happen many times, and this frustrates me. And Brandon, it's one of my biggest pet peeves. Okay, and it's this: when someone receives a personal revelation from God for their lives, and then they take that and market it to the masses and say, this is something that we should all live. This is a principle that we should all adopt in our lives. Okay? And I'll share another anecdote to kind of explain what I'm meaning there. But in this scenario, for this brother to come to me and say this, saying that we should look at the anti-Nephi Lehis and how they laid down their weapons of war and just let the Lamanites kill them, and that's an attitude that we should have amongst all Latter-day Saints, because there's a verse in there that it says that they were pure before God and they were going to paradise, and that's awesome for them, that they were able to be that clean before God, that they didn't break their covenant, pick up their swords again, and they went to their Maker with clean hands and a pure heart. I think that's amazing. But then to say that that is the attitude that we need to have in 2025 amongst all the members of the church is pretty alarming. I have a charge as a man to preside, provide, and protect my family. And I take that third one very seriously, protecting my family and loved ones and the innocent. And to assume that to protect, for me, I feel that I need to be equipped, trained, and armed to defend my family and future children and the innocent. Like, that is something that I feel in my bones, that is a responsibility that I have. And it's troubling when I have conversations with people, and this isn't just some one-off conversation. I've had other conversations with other members of the church that think that it is unrighteous to participate in the bearing of arms and to further promote violence. And anyways, I don't think that that is a thought and position that is held by a lot of Latter-day Saints, but it was a conversation that was troubling enough that I felt the need to talk about it here. What are your reactions, Brando?
Did you say there was another anecdote you were going to share?
Oh, there was. In regards to my frustration of people receiving personal revelation and then projecting it to the masses.
On the point.
But yeah, just on this.
This is exactly, we don't usually talk with each other about what we're going to talk about besides like the bare bones topics.
Yes.
So I was thinking exactly of the anti-Nephi Lehis and the stripling warriors, how they in a sense made a different covenant than their fathers. And I believe they were pure before God too, by going and defending themselves and by going to war.
Yeah, the 2,000 stripling warriors.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, the 2,000 stripling warriors. And so that's all I'm going to say. Like, I think I agree with you that's frustrating.
Yeah. And so this other anecdote, I used to work with an organization that wasn't officially a part of the church, but it was like everyone was a member. It was like LDS adjacent type deal. And so we had an event in which a female speaker was invited to share some thoughts with us. And basically the story and presentation that she gave with us is that she had a dream one time where she was presented two paths and she saw the end result of walking down each of these paths, Brandon. And the first path was what her life would look like if she didn't go to the temple every single week. Okay? And the second path was what her life would look like if she did go to the temple every single week. And so she had this dream and her life looked drastically different on both ends. And then what she started to do is go to the temple every single week. And being in the temple is amazing. I have had some of my most strong revelations from God and spiritual experiences in the temple. I was in the temple on Saturday. It was amazing. And so she starts going to the temple every single week, and she lives in a place where she lives like an hour and a half from a temple. And so then she begins to tell us
commitment.
Yeah. She then begins to tell us like all the sacrifices that she had to make. She had like 6 kids, and she had to coordinate every single week to go to the temple. And that's great. Going to the temple, I think that's phenomenal. And then she begins to tell us that there were instances in which she couldn't go to the temple for like 2 weeks because she was going on some vacation or business trip in which there wasn't a temple available. And so then she said that she felt that she needed to go. For example, she was going to be gone for 2 weeks. So instead, the week before, she needed to go 3 times so that she could, quote unquote, bank her temple visits. Okay? All right. And then she begins to tell each of us that to be spiritually minded and in tune with the Lord, that we also need to go to the temple every single week. And leading up to weeks in which we're not going to have a temple available to us, that we need to go multiple times to, quote unquote, bank our temple visits.
Interesting.
And I was just had an icky feeling while she was saying this, okay? Again, going to the temple is phenomenal. I've had amazing experiences in the temple. But when a personal revelation is received like that for this woman, I don't doubt that what she was saying to us was true, that her life would have looked drastically different if she didn't go to the temple every single week. But then taking that personal revelation she had and saying, hey, this is the way that we all need to live to be good with God. And if you are going on a vacation for 2 weeks a month, then you need to go to the temple 4 or 5 times the week before so that you can bank your temple visits.
This is flirting with Hiram Page territory.
Hiram Page,
Hiram Page in church history, real very, very short synopsis. He was a member of the church back in Joseph Smith's time that went around saying that he was receiving revelation for the church.
Okay.
And Joseph Smith, there's a section in Doctrine and Covenants about it where Joseph Smith had to go and rebuke him. And that's when we received scripture that says that the only one who can receive revelation for the entirety of the church is the prophet at the time. And so it kind of is just that principle of only stewards can receive revelation for who they have stewardship over. I believe parents can receive revelation for their children, maybe until a certain point. But other than that, if someone is not your steward, they cannot receive revelation for you. And the prophet receives revelation for the entirety of the church. I'm not saying this lady, I mean, essentially what you're saying is she was saying all the members of the church should engage in this. And that's why I said it's flirting with in Hiram Page territory, because she's essentially saying God through me is now telling the members of the church that you need to do this to get this result.
Interesting. I had forgotten about this. I'm just looking at this up now. Well, yeah, everyone go read DNC 43 because that's where that is. But it was just really troubling to me because I'm like, I go to the temple often. I love it. Now, it aired on kind of scrupulosity, which if anyone doesn't know scrupulosity, it's like this hyper sensation and thought that you need to constantly like be so meticulous in your keeping of commandments, or you're going to church, or you're repenting and doing all these things, that it is a form of like anxiety.
Sounds miserable.
Yes. And so not to say that this woman necessarily had this, but I know after talking to a lot of people that heard the same presentation, they came up to me, they're like, what do you think about this? Going to the temple every single week, and like if we don't, like we have to bank it and all this stuff, and like treating temple visits as if it's this like reserve where, oh, if it goes down to 0, we are not good with God. I need to go, if I'm going to be gone for a month, I need to go to the temple 5 times that week to then have the bank sufficient so that each week that passes, I still have one in the bank so that I'm good with God.
And listen, that we're not saying we have a problem necessarily with her doing that.
No,
if that's her
great.
journey, that's incredible.
Yes.
That's awesome. I personally couldn't do that with my circumstances. And that's why we're saying we started having the problem. You started having the problem as soon as she said everyone needs to do
Yes.
this. Right.
Exactly. Again, when you receive personal revelation, I think you should follow that revelation. And maybe you can share that with people, saying like, this is an experience that I had with God. I went to God in prayer, and this is the answer that I received. I invite you to go and ask God how you can have a better relationship with him, or something like that. Instead of saying, this is the answer that I got. Okay, everyone, all of you need to do this. All of you need to do this. I received a revelation in the temple one time that I needed to go join the United States Marine Corps.
Do I need to do that?
What?
Do I need to do that now? Because
When people ask me if they should join the Marine Corps, I say, no. That's what I say first off to kind of shock them. But I'm like, well, tell me why you want to join the Marine Corps. Anyways, and so that's just something that's frustrating to me. And yeah, that conversation that I had in regards to concealed carrying with that member kind of reminded me of that frustration that I have. And I think every instance we need to go to our Maker in prayer on our knees and ask for these guidances, and that we need to follow suit. And yeah, remember exactly what you're saying. Remember who we have stewardship over, and not try to go out of the bounds of that stewardship. And yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments.
Well, and Jackson, just one last aspect of this that may be more relatable to people on a micro scale.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe in some senses we all kind of do what this lady did without actually saying it to people. Maybe we go out and we see someone not living exactly the way that we've received personal revelation on how we should live, and we subconsciously judge them for that, or consciously judge them for that. There are standards and doctrine that have been set forth, and I just think this goes back to looking at the beam in thine own eye instead of the mote in thy neighbor's eye. And if you've received personal revelation for how you should live, and hopefully it's in line with the standards, but maybe it goes a little bit beyond that for yourself, you don't need to judge people who don't live that exact way either.
Yeah. Anyways, let me know what you think in the comments. Go to the temple as often as you possibly can. It's phenomenal. Read your scriptures, gain a proximity with God so that you can receive revelation from him on what you need to do with your life and those you have stewardship over. Anyways, I think we'll do one more episode tomorrow for this week. We actually got a really awesome guest coming in, Austin Falter. And then the rest of the week, I think we're just going to take off, chill with our families, and we'll see you in the following week. But God bless you. And remember, if you're not looking at the world through a gospel lens, you're only getting half the story. God bless you.